Okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the this March full council meeting of the parish council. So, first on the agenda is to receive and note apologies for absence. We got any?
Present, Chairman.
It's nice and straightforward. So 17221 to receive declarations of interest. Has anyone got any personal interests on any items on the agenda? Bob?
I'm declaring a personal interest in item 180/21/3, number 2, the planning application you referred to.
Okay. Anyone else? Brett? You're on mute, Brett.
Unmute yourself, Brett. Go on.
Yep, sorry, 181/21.
Okay. Anyone else? Anyone with any prejudicial interest on any items on the agenda? And anyone with any pecuniary interests on any items on the agenda? Then we go to public 17321, public participation. So now we've got 3 members of the public, and do you all want to speak on the items, or?
I'll kick off, Mark.
Right. Okay.
If that's all right, and then if I leave anything out, I'm sure the other members of the public will join.
Yep. Okay.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Chairman. Can you all hear me?
Yep. Yes.
Excellent. I should like to raise serious concerns on behalf of a number of local residents regarding the planning application for the takeaway at 65 High Street, which is on your agenda at item 180/21. As I'm sure you're all aware, there have been over 40 letters of objection to this application and no letters of support. This application is for the same takeaway use as the one opposed unanimously by the parish council and refused previously by the district council in 2012. The district council planning committee stated then the proposals would result in serious harm to the residential amenities of adjoining occupiers, particularly to the attached residential dwelling at 63 High Street, by reason of noise, smell and general disturbance. The reasons for refusal are still the same, if not even stronger. Since then, parking on the high street has worsened with the loss of the parking for the hairdresser, sewing shop and the flat above. In addition, the 2 parking spaces for the deli in the 2 garages at the rear have now been allocated to the flat above the deli, which was given consent last year, despite the concerns voiced by the parish council and local residents at the time. It's notable that the application that councillors may recall for a pair of 2-bed semis on Rod Oliver's yard, just 2 doors down the high street, was refused because, and I quote, "The proposal does not incorporate adequate on-site vehicular parking and manoeuvring facilities to the standard required by the local planning authority. The proposal, if permitted, would therefore be likely to result in an undesirable increase in on-street parking to the detriment of highway safety. The access is unsatisfactory to serve the proposed development by reason of its inadequate width, and the proposal would therefore likely result in parking of vehicles on the highway and or the stopping and manoeuvring of vehicles on the highway to the detriment of highway safety." And this is important, a shared use access should be 5 meters wide to allow 2 vehicles to access the highway simultaneously. So that was on Rod Oliver's site. The proposed access drive for the takeaway is narrower, only 2.9 meters, so not meeting the 5 meter standard. It has poorer visibility and would serve not a pair of 2-bed semis, but a 4-bedroom house number 63, a 3-bedroom flat above the deli, and now a takeaway. One crucial fact that is omitted from the application is that the owners of number 63 have a right of way over the whole yard area shown in the submitted site plan. This is to enable vehicles to enter and leave in forward gear, as required by the original planning consent for the butcher's shop some years ago. This means that the yard cannot be used for parking or storage by the owner of number 65 because it would obstruct that right of way. So there are no parking spaces in front of the garages. The only on-site parking in those 2 garages to the rear of the deli have now been allocated as parking spaces to the flat. However, councillors will note that there is no provision for storage for the takeaway, and these spaces will almost certainly become storage because the original cold store in the deli has now become a staircase to the flat. This all means that in effect there will be no parking spaces for the 3-bedroom flat, the 2 full-time equivalent takeaway staff, delivery drivers and customers. If this application is passed, there will be an inevitable consequences of illegal parking on double yellow lines, residents' access to their own driveways being blocked, and much more evening traffic on a 20-mile-per-hour quiet residential road. Councillors, I'm sure, will have noted from the letters of objection the problems that residents already have in this respect. This application would make matters even worse. But that's not the least of it. The plans would provide an extract flue for the takeaway located less than 2 car lengths from the bedroom windows of number 63. Less than 2 car lengths. How would councillors feel if this was their bedroom window? To approve this would just not be right. Ruth and Arthur Brown deserve some protection in this respect. The prevailing wind will also take the smells across the gardens of several adjacent properties, including the Mill House, a listed property. The flue would be unsightly and be out of place in the conservation area and very visible from the high street, as well as the properties lower down the hill. The shared yard with number 63 would lead to considerable late night disturbance. The kitchen door is less than 4 metres from Ruth and Arthur Brown's back door and no intervening fence. The proposed takeaway use would also increase litter, not only from the takeaway, but as we have unfortunately found, owners often empty their litter, commonly the ashtray, out of the car whilst waiting to collect their meals at the Sunrise and the Tandoori. The applicant has stated in section 14 of the application form that there is adequate space on site for the storage of waste and recycling, but there isn't. As mentioned earlier, the whole of the shared yard is subject to a right of way in favour of number 63, and a covenant on the owners of number 65, and I quote here from the deeds, to keep it clear of obstructions, vehicles or otherwise. So where will all the commercial waste bins go? Perhaps in the garages with the staff cars and all the stores. Extended opening hours were resisted previously for the deli to safeguard residential amenity. The applicant here is seeking a very significant extension of these hours, which would result in late night disturbance every night of the week. Please remember that disturbance after closing is often the worst. This is when staff clean out metal pans and empty waste bins. And this would be less than 4 metres from Ruth and Arthur's door. The deli was well supported and a viable, if small, business providing daytime refreshments to many residents. It was particularly valued by those in the village who did not have their own transport. With greater working from home in the future, demand is likely to be even higher for this facility. We therefore ask the Parish Council and our district councillors to strongly object to this application and to use the policies in the neighbourhood plan to protect highway safety and parking provision, protect the Videli as a valued local service, protect our residential amenity, and to protect the historic conservation area. Thank you, Chairman.
Unmuted, Mark.
Oh, I've made that mistake this time. So do either member of the public other members of the public want to add to those comments?
No, other than endorse what Mark said.
I would concur with what's just said, completely concurring with what Mark has set out there.
Okay, thank you. So that's the end of public participation. So we will get reasonably quickly to that planning application. We've got a few matters that we need to deal with before then. So next we have 17421 matters for information only, starting with Clerk to update on the meeting legislation and dates for meetings.
Thank you, Chairman. As most of you will recall, the Local Authority and Police and Crime Panel Coronavirus Regulations 2020 came into force to allow all local authorities actually to hold virtual meetings. However, the legislation ends on the 7th of May, which is out of step with the government's roadmap in order for us to meet face to face as a large group. So there is some lobbying going on at the moment to see if the government will actually rectify that and extend the legislation. However, as we've not heard anything to date, what the Chairman and I have discussed is to actually bring forward some of the parish council meetings and also the annual meeting of the electorate, so that they're both held before the 7th of May and therefore within the legislation for the virtual meetings. So with this in mind, the annual meeting of the electorate, which is the one that our organisations and residents are invited to, will be held on Thursday the 29th of April, and the annual meeting of the parish council will be held on Tuesday the 4th of May. It is hoped that by the time we get to the end of May meetings, we will have some indication as to how we proceed from here.
Okay, and then we have the Sutton annual litter pick, 12th of June.
Yes, the litter pick we've picked a date. We will, or there's likelihood that we might be within some sort of COVID restrictions for social distancing and maybe the groups, but we think that would be viable by then to actually hold our annual litter pick. We didn't hold it last year. We're also aware that there are a number of residents and local groups in the village that also want to be involved with litter picking, and Lucy, our time bank coordinator, is looking at how we can actually make it into something more than just an annual event. But for the moment, that's the date that we are going to try to work to.
Okay, thank you. And the last one is the update on the upgrade of the LED street lights.
Yes, the order has been placed with the John Henry Group to replace the street lights. We hit a little bit of a delay because it came to our notice that the street light in Rosemary Lane has not actually been there for quite some time, which actually sort of threw us a little bit. We didn't want to, well, we couldn't replace something that wasn't there. We have actually consulted with the residents who live in Rosemary Lane, and they have indicated that they would rather not have the street light put back in where it was. So with this in mind, we have altered the order to replacing the 12 lights and for the maintenance of 12 lights.
Okay, and thank you for that. And then we had one other item, but that was circulated to all councillors. That was the Connection Bus newsletter, which we received. So that brings us to 17521 to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of February 2021. Has anybody got any corrections to those minutes? Oh.
Shall I just, it's not often that the clerk has a correction to her own minutes, but after the meeting, when we were finalising the accounts, it came to our notice that for the Viola payment on the minutes, it should have read £138.67 and not £130.67. So if that could be altered, please, Chairman.
Okay, anybody with any other comments? So I'll propose that we approve the minutes with that amendment. Do I have a seconder for that? Brian, I think, was first. Can I see those in favour of approving the minutes with that one correction?
Thank you. That's 11.
How many of us? And any abstentions? And any one abstention? Any against?
I must have lost somebody then.
Shall we do that one again then?
Well, if it's one abstention, then it's 12 in favour.
Yeah. Okay. Then next we have the resolution. So 17621, to receive and note the resolution action chart. So anybody got any questions on any items on the resolution action chart? If not, then we're only receiving and noting it, so we won't do a formal proposal on that. That then takes us to 17721, to receive reports in relation to Sutton. First of all, from Councillor Lorna Dupre as the County Councillor. So Lorna, if you could give the County Council report.
Thank you very much indeed. I've circulated my report, but it was written some weeks ago and an amazing amount has happened in March. So I will just give you some updates, if I may, on what has happened since I circulated my report. Firstly, on the Farmgate issue with the award of the tenancy to the Deputy Leader of the Council, who has now resigned his post as a councillor and reportedly moved to Norfolk. The update is that the Audit and Accounts Committee did meet on Friday the 5th of March. It allowed into the public domain 31 recommendations from the auditors regarding the management of the County Council's farms estate, which is a very significant landholding. So there were 31 recommendations for action just in terms of how the farm's estate is managed. But what has remained confidential is the information around how it arose that the Deputy Leader of the County Council was awarded a farm tenancy against stiff competition, and was also the beneficiary of a council loan to improve the property. All of that is still under wraps. There are 2 meetings of the Audit and Accounts Committee this week, the latter of which is on Friday, and that will be the last chance that members will have to try to encourage the council to put that information into the public domain in the public interest, because after that, you'll be familiar with PERDA, the shutters will come down and there will be no publication of the information surrounding those events. So Friday really is the last ditch for the public to find out what actually happened there. On COVID, just an update as of this morning. The COVID cases in Cambridgeshire are currently 52 per 100,000 population. Currently that's as at 17 March, so that's 6 days ago. However, that masks significant variation, and there are 116 per 100,000 cases in population in Finland. Which is therefore, as you can make out, more than double that average number. There is still a lot of enduring infection with COVID in Finland, in a number of different settings, a lot of which are work settings and around things like food processing plants and so on. The vaccines, there's been a vaccine inequalities group that has been set up to try and address how we can encourage underrepresented groups who are not coming forward for vaccines to do so, and how we reach those. I've been asking for statistics around minority ethnic groups, and it's well known anecdotally that there is less willingness to come forward for vaccination among Black and minority ethnic groups. We do have some statistics, but those are purely on numbers of people from minority ethnic groups being vaccinated, and not what proportions those figures represent of the population. And that's rather difficult to do because you're checking against the 2011 census, which until the results of last weekend's census are published, is the most recent demographic information we have. So there's an issue about how difficult it is to acquire that information, but also how accurate it is 10 years on, even with your best attempt to kind of work forward on that. And of course, the vaccination programme has been proceeding at pace, a lot going on, very impressive. Though, as has been widely reported in the media, we are expecting a slowdown in the provision of the vaccine starting from next week. So there will be something of a hiatus, but we are assured there will be enough vaccine for everybody who's had their first jab to have their second jab within the 12 weeks. That is the UK government's recommendation. Then further updates from me. The byway that I reported round the back of the Meeple Outdoor Centre, the obstruction there has now been cleared, so that's been done. The Fens Biosphere, I submitted the motion to the council last week. It was, again, as at the district, as Mark will report, very much watered down, but in its watered down form, it was agreed unanimously. So there is at least the beginning of a discussion there among the elected politicians in Cambridgeshire about the Fens Biosphere and what its candidate status may have to offer. Newshire Hall, there's been an update in that this morning we agreed, along with a package of other green energy schemes, we agreed the money to install solar powered electric charging carports at Alconbury. As I've said, Alconbury is not friendly for public transport, so most of the travel there will be by car, and there is the very strong intention, at least, of the council to provide electric charging points for vehicles in that new location. Then finally, on the last page, I've had significant headaches last week with the resurfacing works in Witcham, which were delayed and also somewhat confused because Skanska appears to confuse the Orchards Witcham, which was due to be resurfaced, with the Orchards Sutton, which was not only not due to be resurfaced, but which I had specifically reported to residents on Facebook was not going to be resurfaced this year. And it got to the point where signage was put up in Sutton, which was then, when the error was pointed out, was moved. But then early on the morning in question, a highways maintenance vehicle rocked up in the Orchards Sutton, which should have gone to the Orchards Witcham. And then they actually, early in the afternoon, barriered off the road at the Orchards Sutton, looking as if they were fully intending to resurface it. So I had a bit of a conniption fit at that point, and I had a discussion in the car with one of the council's highways officers, who apologised for the confusion and said that Skanska would be having they'd be having a robust conversation with Skanska about all of that. It's difficult having two estates called the Orchards in adjacent villages, but they really ought to have known better than that. However, the good news is that it is apparently, I'm hearing, likely that the Orchards Sutton will actually be put back into the resurfacing package for the forthcoming year, 2021 to 22. I just hope they don't go and resurface the Orchards Witcham all over again. Verge maintenance is on your agenda for later. I've had a couple of emails now with the Highways Department, and they have provided some information which I'm sure you'll be discussing later on about their general stance and their openness to having discussion about wildflowering in verges and so on. So your clerk has that information, and so does Mark as your chair. And finally, updates. The Combined Authority. When I wrote this report, there was still no news of the £45 million for affordable housing, which the government was holding back, nor about the closing date as to whether the £100 million scheme was closing in March 2021 or March 2022. There is now an update on that, and the government has withdrawn the 45 million out of the 100 million for affordable housing for Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, on the grounds that the programme was effectively not being well run, but also that it was not achieving the value for money that the government had expected. So that money has gone, and it is clear that it has gone. However, the government has said, it has written to the Mayor to say that it will consider making some money available, though it hasn't specified an amount, up until March 2022, to provide some affordable housing, but under much more stringent conditions. So they will be expecting regular reports back, evidence of value for money assessments, evidence of how the money is being spent. They will be much, much, much more hands-on for this. And the other element of that is that there was an extra separate £70 million that was to be spent on affordable housing in Cambridge. And that money will be paid in full, but the government will now be dealing with Cambridge directly rather than through the Combined Authority, which says something for the level of confidence that the government has in the Combined Authority's ability to manage that money. So that's quite stark. It is also quite clear that the closing date for the whole project was March 2021 and not March 2022, as the Combined Authority had been saying. So that is a massive piece of news with huge impacts, and in some cases as yet unknown impacts, because some of the conditions affect which part of the money you use when. The Mayor split that 100 million into 60 million, which would be used for grants, and 40 million, which would be recycled as loans to housing providers, which would then be repaid and recycled so that the scheme kind of lived on after the end of the 5 years. Now, that was a perfectly acceptable thing to do from the government point of view. They'd said in the original agreement that they were very open to that and they wanted to see that happen. However, that the conditions require money to be spent out of the 55 million before they dip into the returning that they have paid, before they dip into any of the returning money. And it's not clear that money that comes back from those loans will then be available to reinvest. So there's a lot still to find out about all of this. The other thing still to find out is that there is another letter that was sent by the government, but not even members of the Combined Authority board have been allowed to see it. And one member of the board who asked to see it in public at the Housing Committee meeting of the Combined Authority was told by legal officers that she would have to submit a Freedom of Information request for them to consider whether they would show her the letter, which is quite extraordinary. The other update was on the Climate Change Commission, which did indeed launch its first interim report on Monday the 15th of March. I thought it was an absolutely excellent report. I attended the launch event. A recording of the launch event is available online, and so is the interim report, which covers a lot of ground and is very ambitious. So I thought that was excellent. Some of the key recommendations in that report are firstly, the establishment by the Combined Authority of a climate cabinet chaired by the Mayor, which they are going to be progressing. They're going to be asked tomorrow to agree for that to be progressed when the board of the Combined Authority meets tomorrow morning. They want to establish a peat committee to meet to consider much further and over a much longer timescale the issue of peatlands in the fens, and how that gets managed in terms of the effects on agriculture and so on. So that's going to be a long piece of dedicated work done by a specialist committee drawn under the ambit of the Climate Change Commission. And finally, there's a lot more other recommendations, but the last one I wanted to draw your attention to specifically was that they were talking about drawing up a vision for the Fens as part of their work. And I think I asked, when we interviewed Baroness Brown on Monday, the chair of the commission at Overview and Scrutiny Committee, I asked how that connected with the Fens biosphere that appears in both my report and in Mark's report. And the response back was that that generally going in the kind of direction that the commission was interested in, and that they were therefore generally supportive. So that's it. Sorry that's been so long.
Any questions on the County Council report, Brian?
Back to item 1, the Farmgate malarkey. Do you believe that information is being withheld because there is a possibility of a prosecution, in which case it might be regarded as sub judice?
I don't believe so. My understanding, and I stand to be corrected because I've not seen the report, my understanding though was that part of the delay, even months ago before bringing it to this stage, was that there had been some question of a referral to the police, and that there had been a decision that there would not be those kind of legal proceedings. But that's only my understanding. I believe that there are that the aim is to prevent a lot of the information coming out into the public domain.
Supplementary, if I may, is that going to be another case where a freedom of information application might reveal the information?
I don't know. I'm still not sure whether the meeting this coming Friday of the Audit and Accounts Committee will agree to put that information into the public domain. The argument when they met on the 5th of March, it was very clear. One member of the committee actually said that they had been given legal briefings, including a warning, I think at barrister level, that if they put this into the public domain, then they would be the members of the committee would be individually legally liable. So there is huge lawyer pressure being put on members of the Audit and Accounts Committee not to agree to put this into the public domain.
Thank you.
Bob, I think, was next.
You're muted, Bob.
I realise that. Entirely different subject in terms of change of subject. I just wondered if I could ask Lorna to support the statement from the GP surgery, Pricefield, given the COVID rollout and the concerns over vaccination going forward. I've had a couple of people approach me and indicate, in a common household, if one partner is included has got an appointment and the other one of similar age hasn't got an appointment, it's quite tempting to turn up and say, if you've got any spare vaccine going around, you've had a no-show, can my other half have a jab? He or she is the same age or whatever, and same cohort. It's very clear advice from the GPs that only those with an appointment should turn up. So I just wonder if to support that might be seen to be a good thing to do.
Thank you very much, Bob. And yes, I absolutely agree with that. I think the efforts made by the NHS to roll out this vaccine have been absolutely remarkable, and I have nothing but praise for how that has been handled. There've been one or two learning issues along the way, particularly with regard to vaccination of under 18s, but in general, it's been astounding. The atmosphere, I know, has been amazing. The volunteer support for the whole programme has been amazing. The professionalism has been remarkable, but they're having to cope with uncertain supplies almost day to day. And they're doing very well with that, but they're having to marshal large numbers of people. I mean, you're talking at Doddington about 1,000+ people in a day. That's huge numbers being put through, remarkably so, but they really have a lot to manage, and it really would be very helpful if people would only turn up if they have an appointment to do so. And yes, it's difficult if you're in a household or a couple, and you think, well, particularly having heard stories of other people who go, actually I just rocked up at the end of the day and I got my vaccine. Those kind of stories make it very difficult to manage a very complex situation. They're doing wonders, but I do think, yes, we need to leave them to do their wonders.
Agreed.
Any other questions? If not, then we'll move to the district council report. There's obviously quite a lot of information in there. Just a couple of things to add of things that have happened since the report was issued. So first of all, we had the operational services committee on yesterday, Monday. There were a number of items there. That included the new business plan for the East Cam street scene. So that's one of the two trading companies. So that's the one that deals with the refuse collection. Nothing too surprising in that. What they are doing is waiting to see the outcome of the government review on waste strategy, which could result in some changes in collections. One particular one that looks like it might be on the cards is a requirement for all councils to collect food waste on a weekly basis. That hasn't been confirmed yet, but the expectation is we'll know later this year whether that's going to be a requirement or not. The other item that finally came to the committee after a long wait was the East Cambridge District Youth Strategy. This one we've been waiting for quite a while. So there was a surveys done in 2019. Not a huge number of young people were spoken to in that, but actually the findings on and the feedback does actually look quite useful. There is an action plan accompanied with that. I proposed an amendment at the committee which was accepted, which would add 3 things to it. One, that they would review the action plan every 6 months, because that was fairly indeterminate in the ways that are being reported. Another one is that they put some measures in there to measure how successful they're being with that. And the third one was to revisit the consultation, because it was, well, almost 2 years old. And of course, not only is you've had the fact that time's moved on, but I think young people in particular have been impacted with COVID, and that's hit their education, but also had broader consequences. And so there is a commitment within the next 12 months to go back and get new input into that. So that was yesterday. Then on Thursday, there is the Finance and Assets Committee. One local item in that of interest is the council has an item on the agenda proposing to demolish what remains of Meeple Outdoor Centre. So there still isn't yet the planning application for the crematorium. That hasn't even been published yet, and certainly not considered. But I think if that goes ahead, then the chances of there being that facility being reopened for young people, tying into that youth report, does seem to be least the council seems to be making that more difficult. Those are the only couple of things I wanted to add. Lorna, is there anything else from the district that you wanted to add?
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay, any questions on the district report? Bob?
Sorry, nearly made the same mistake again. Yes, no surprise. You reported on the co-op opening quite rightly. It seems to be relatively popular. I just wondered, as Lorna is on what was the bus working group, bus review working group, which is now incorporating cycling and walking according to the report. I just wonder if Lorna, if you might, or possibly Mark as well, would contact the manager at the co-op, because at our Transport Working Party, we've identified a desire, in fact, the Parish Council voted or asked for a footpath on the south side of the Ely Road, so that pedestrians from the majority of the village could access on foot the co-op without having to cross the road 4 times. So there seems to be evidence at the moment on the grass verge of pedestrians using the grass verge to access the co-op, which is fundamentally dangerous. It's not a safe walking area, and it's not visible, and car users, other vehicles will not be expecting to see pedestrians on that side of the road. I still feel there is an urgent need to dig deep and find the finance to cover what will be a best part of £100,000 project to put a footpath in on that side of the road, as the Parish Council requested originally. So I just wonder if there's any chance of you reaching out to the manager of the co-op to see if we can elicit their support for the idea, if nothing else, because I think we need to have a 3-way go at this: Parish Council, County Council and the co-op.
I think we need to take that away. I have to say I'm not optimistic. There is a huge number of projects in the east. It's called the TIP, the Transport Infrastructure Plan, and it is a TIP because all of the desired transport projects are tipped into this great long list of doom, which is all unfunded and just sits there year on year. I'm very happy to do my best, but I don't want to give false hope that that's something that's going to be resolved quickly. I know that it appeared, we saw recently at the bus cycling and walking group, we met a couple of weeks ago and saw some of the feedback, or saw the feedback from the consultation that happened about a year ago. It's a bit of a mess because it's just an uncollected, unsorted list of what everybody said. And some of the things that people asked for or commented on were the same thing, just expressed in different ways. Officers didn't have the local knowledge to work out that what somebody said about one thing was the same as what somebody else was saying apparently about another thing. So we've asked the officers to go away and do some more work on that and try and bring that together in maps and so on that we can then share with parishes and consult about. So you will have an opportunity as a parish to say what you want there. And I know that there were representations made in that consultation about that, that very issue about the footway on the south side of Ely Road. So you will have a chance to have that say, and we can have a discussion then. Mark and I will happily take that away. But I have to say at the outset, I'm not optimistic in view of the scale of everything that is on that list, and also, as I reported in my report earlier, the loss of £7.5 million from the government in terms of road maintenance money. Anyway, I know that's not so much maintenance as new work, but it's financially problematic. But yes, I'm very aware of the need and will continue to do my best to get something happening on that.
Jessica.
You mentioned, Mr. Chairman, that there were plans to demolish the existing buildings at Maple Outdoor Centre.
Yeah.
Where is the funding for that coming from, and how are they justifying spending money on the demolition?
I would suggest the meeting will live stream on Thursday, and you will see. I would assume then you'll see the debate and the arguments. But I think from memory, and Lorna may have a better recall, it's something over £50,000 just to do that demolition, isn't it?
And where's that funding coming from?
I haven't got the figure at my fingertips as to how much that demolition will cost, but the council is spending money like it's going out of fashion on the Meeple Outdoor Centre. It went to the council. Remember, they had that secret meeting in July, end of July, where we argued volubly for the meeting to be held in public, and it wasn't. And that was when the news first was published that the council had been working on the plans for the crematorium for so long. At that meeting, members gave consent for the council to spend a further £30,000 in this financial year on that project. That has now been well exceeded, and Mark has been keeping track of all of the spending over £500 that the council is obliged to publish online, and they've spent, I think, 3 times that at least, without going back to the council for further authorization for extra spending. So they are just spending it as they feel they want to, without coming back to the council. And any amount of money they want seems to be forthcoming.
Yeah, and
so it's from that same pot that the budget for the demolition is coming from, that's not being authorized, is what you're saying.
So in terms of the money that is spent so far, well, we don't know the latest, but prior to the meeting last July, £71,487 was spent. That meeting approved £30,000 of expenditure. In actual fact, a further £91,451 has been spent. It's come from what is called the the surplus saving reserve. So when the council makes savings, it puts that into a reserve, and that money's been spent, or most of the funding has come from there. But as I say, the meeting hasn't been held yet. It's only on the agenda, so I think we'll find out more on Thursday as to what is actually happening there. And we still don't know when the actual planning application will go in, because until and the other thing we haven't yet seen is the results of the consultation that closed over a month ago as well. So hopefully in the next couple of months we'll find out a bit more, but that's where we are with that.
Pay for a nice football for that amount of money.
Yeah. Anybody with any other questions? No. Okay. Well, thank you, Lorna. Now we move to 17821 to fill a casual vacancy, and I'll get our clerk to explain the procedure, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Chairman. As Council is aware, we've got 2 vacancies, but we have one applicant to fill one of those 2 vacancies with us this evening, Luke Jordan. As we've got less applicants than the amount of seats, we don't need to do a formal sort of little election process. So the chairman will invite Luke to just introduce himself, and then the council will just do a formal vote to pass a resolution to accept Luke to join the council. Following that, because we're remote, it's a little bit tricky to sign the declaration of acceptance of office. So Luke has a copy, he will sign it, and then I will make the arrangements with him to get that signed, and then he will receive the summons to the April Parish Council meeting to formally take his seat if that's the council's wish. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then Luke, so it's now your opportunity to just introduce yourself to us.
Thank you, Mark. Good evening all. Thank you for your time this evening. Yes, so my name is Luke Jordan. I have a partner, Rachel, and I have an 18-month-old daughter, Alexandra. We relocated to Cambridgeshire 2 years ago. We moved into Sutton just over 12 months ago now, into the new estate being constructed by Linden Homes. And over the last 12 months, you know, having spent all of our time in lockdown and in the village, you know, the village itself, the community and what the village has on offer really has been kind of indispensable to us. And so seeing the advert on the famous Sutton notice board in my house, as I constantly refer to that for news. I was aware that there's a place on the council, and I thought it'd be a great opportunity to, you know, get to know the community a little bit more, and, you know, try and do my piece really in paying back what has been, you know, a real godsend for us over the last 12 months. So yeah, that's the reason for wanting to join, and I'm not sure what else I can add really.
That's enough. Thank you a lot for that and for putting your name forward. So yes, as Rosie says, we just need to do a formal sort of approval. So I'm going to propose that we approve Luke's co-option. Can I see a seconder? Bob Harker was first, but we had several. So I'll put that to the vote. Those in favour of that approval?
So say we.
It's unanimous.
Okay.
Wow, very grateful.
We'll let you sign the form, and then obviously you can stay in the meeting if you want to this time, and then join properly next time. What I'm going to do now is to skip the finance part, and we'll come back to that. I'll move on to 18021 planning. I'll just quickly go through the approvals and the refusals, and then on the applications I will go on to the 65 the High Street, and then we'll do the other ones after that, so that the members of the public who join the meeting can hear that part of the discussion. So 18021 planning approvals, there's 20 0 16 11 FUL Meadlands Farm, the Galt Sutton and replacement dwelling. There are no planning refusals. And then on applications, I'll go to item 2, which is 210022 FUL 65 the High Street, Sutton, change of use of the existing cafe to food generous on a hot food takeaway in conjunction with alterations and additions to a form first floor flat, access, parking and site works. Can I see who wants to comment on this first, and what we should how we should respond as a parish council? Andrew, and then Brett.
Okay, I think Mr. Baker put his points across very well, and I think as a parish council, looking at the website, as he says, there's no letters of support. Everyone is against this. I think it will have an effect on existing businesses in the village as well if it goes ahead. So I think we should fully support the resident in their objections.
And then
yeah, so I've got exactly the same thoughts as last time it came round, and this time there seems to be a little bit more detail going into John's explanation, or Mark's explanation, sorry. It does sound pretty horrendous, and yes, I would support that. You know, we definitely recommend refusal of this. It's going to be a nightmare.
Bob.
Having declared a personal interest in this, it would be wrong of me not to say anything, but I think Mark has covered it exceedingly well. Mark Baker's covered it exceedingly well. 40 responses is up at the sort of garden close level of village interest, and no single support for the application. I don't buy into impact on other businesses particularly, because I don't think we should be looking at it from a commercial viability point of view or detriment to existing businesses. That's outside of planning scope. But I do think the objections we as a parish council unanimously made back in 2011 for the decision in 2012 are still relevant today, in that we objected on parking, traffic, the odour, the noise, and the impact on the residents. And I don't think this application has got a single tick on any box. So I will be objecting to it, and I urge other councillors to do the same. Not that we're a decision-making body, of course, but we will be recommending, I hope, to the district council that they refuse it. And if I noticed in, I think it was Lorna's report, perhaps it was in your report, Mark, that you were minded to keep an eye on which way the officer was likely to decide on this one, the planning officer, and then, if necessary, you would bring it to planning committee. And in fact, in 2011, we also asked that it was a planning committee decision and not left to the officer in charge of the investigation or the application. So I think with that, I would also support that view that that is necessary to do.
So there are two things there you could do. One is that the parish council could put that on the form. The other option, which I think what Lorna was, or we were suggesting in our report, was district councillors can call that in, but sometimes we only do that if so, for example, in this case, if the officer is already recommending refusal, then we wouldn't call it in, because it would be dealt with without having to go to committee. So we can either decide as a parish council to do that, or you can take it on the word of the district councillors that we would call it in if it went to if the officer wasn't recommending refusal. But if the parish council does it, it will go to committee, whichever way the officer is recommending.
What decision making have you got, Mark, in terms of is it already a done deal that if the planning officer was minded to approve it, do you need to get more backing to call it into committee, or can a single councillor do it?
A single councillor can do it.
I'm happy not to make that part of the parish council's request then, if you and indeed Lorna are both minded to call it in as our representatives on the district council, then I'm happy to leave that with you rather than make it and confuse the issue any further, but open to other ideas.
So I've got Beth next.
I think the points were very well made by the resident, but just to play devil advocate for a minute, surely these parking issues are going to be an issue regardless of what goes into that unit. Whether it's a takeaway or a cafe at the deli or anything else, surely there's going to be issues with parking anyway.
Brian?
Yeah, I would say on the taking the challenging, if you like, the devil's advocate point of view, takeaway meals suggest arriving at and leaving with. And I think the deli as a deli was far more an arrive on foot sort of place. It's not a hit and run, visit and go thing. And I think we have said it all in the previous applications that we've looked at. I thought Mark Baker's submission was absolutely textbook. He raised absolutely every point against it. And I agree with every point. And I am, I'm a former business owner, not in this village, but a former business owner. And if I was looking at those premises, I wouldn't be at all surprised if the parish councillor came down on a ton of bricks if I applied to put in the kind of business that's being proposed. It's crackers. That may be unparliamentary, but I think it's true. It's the wrong business in the wrong place.
Brendan, were you indicating?
Yes. So I do empathise for all the points that have been saying about, the neighbours to it. My concern is more along the lines of what would be suitable? Because we go back to, say, everyone talks about the deli, and yes, it was fine. It's more likely to be turn up on foot, leave on foot, but it did generate its own traffic. And there was parking outside, and then you're pulling in for half an hour for, you know, a bit of cake and a coffee. So it is a slightly different animal in that respect. What I'm hearing is the more case of it's the hours which would be more a problem, but that's it. But again, my point really is what would be suitable to go in there, because we're talking about the parking's all disappeared and so forth. Well, you're just going to be left with a commercial unit, which what we're going to do with. But that's all I want to add.
Yeah, it does have the permission already to be a retail unit, as in a shop, or to be a cafe. So the only thing we're deciding is whether it could be a hot food takeaway. Bob again, or actually, I'll go for Jessica because I don't think Jessica's spoken yet, and then Bob.
Thank you. Just so we're not looking to the future, are we? We're not looking to discuss what could or could not go in there. We're looking at this particular application, and this one is unsuitable, and we need to just sort of restrict our focus to the impact that this particular application will have on the residents, on the parking, on the safety of the villagers as a result of the parking, etc. So as much as I sympathise with your point, Brendan, I don't think that we can necessarily explore that at this point. We have to just consider the evidence presented by Mark, which was the summary of the concerns online.
Certainly, and what we're looking at here is just putting more precedent behind more of what we've said before as well. So that's one point. That point, we need to be sure we don't completely torpedo all kinds of ideas about something coming. But, yeah.
Bob and then Stan.
The point's been well made, I think, but the difference between this application and previous applications is also the operating hours. And residents who come and park on the high street because they've got not a garage necessarily, might find it very difficult to park there if they've got a takeaway operating primarily in the evenings, as opposed to the retail outlet that we had previously. Not that we can condone that, we have to take the application as we see it, but that to me is a big disadvantage of this type of application. Hot food, smells, we don't want people parking there. We already have problems with parking, illegal parking on the outside the Chinese takeaway, with people parking on the wrong side of the road, on the pavement. And this is going to exacerbate already a bad situation. So I'm against it from that evening activity primarily.
And then Stan.
Well, to sort of be devil's advocate with some of the other comments, you know, the fact that people have bought a house with no parking, what gives them the right to have parking on the high street? So the high street is all full up with residents, so why can't 65 have parking? And I think, you know, I sympathise with most of the comments, the smells, the noise, unsociable, but the fact that the parking, you know, what gives everybody any God-given right to park in front of their own house, which was on one of the letters, because he can't park outside his house. But the highway is not provided there for his own personal parking. And I just think we need to be careful what we wish for. That if we put restrictions on now, if something comes to us in the future, we could be shooting ourselves in the foot.
I think the other thing we need to bear in mind, and this is going, if we compare to the decision in 2011, and some of us were around on the parish council then, yeah, we've got longer operating hours. But the other thing that actually no one's just referred to in this part of the debate is also there's the 3-bedroom flat, which if somebody was normally building a 3-bedroom property, you would expect 2 parking spaces. So even before you start to operate the takeaway, those vehicles, you're already adding to the parking pressure, and that's something that wasn't there in the 2011 application. So already it's worsened or increased the pressure on the high street even before your first takeaway customer has turned up. So does anybody want to make a proposal? Bob Brown.
Yeah, so can I propose that the parish council would ask that the planning is refused based purely, not purely, but in support of the concerns of the local residents, which are numerous. I don't think, other than garden close, I haven't seen such a response for any planning application being so large. I think everything that Mark has said is reasonable. It just doesn't make any sense to allow this particular project to go ahead. So I propose that we go for outright refusal based on the concerns of the village.
Okay, I'm happy to second that so that we've got a seconded proposal. Does anybody want to make any other comments, or if not, we have a proposal. Can I see those in favour of the proposal proposed by Bob?
It's unanimous, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So that's it on that item. So can I ask the residents who came along to look at that item, if you can leave the Zoom meeting now. If you want to continue watching the parish council meeting, it is available on YouTube, so you'll be able to watch it there. Okay, thank you. I will continue to go through the other planning applications, so we'll do that before we go back to the finance. So I'll go back to the one that we skipped, which was 20.00507 RMA. So it's 107 The Row, approval of the details for reserved matters for appearance, landscaping, layout and scale of the previously approved 18.01768 OUT for the demolition of outbuildings and erection of one dwelling, creating a new access and associated works. And then it says the amendment involves amended plans to reduce the size and scale of the dwelling house, including the hatch and driveway position. I noticed on the planning portal we had a previous response from the parish council on this one, where we raised concerns about the design of the building and the materials used not being in keeping with the properties in the surrounding area. So we've already previously put that comment in, but there have been some revision to the plans since then. Anybody got any comments on Stan?
Well, I suppose we can apply here to all other planning applications if there's been a previous, that we just expect continuity and consistency from planning authorities or planning officers, that if they put it in there a year or so ago, we'd expect the same rules to apply. And if you put that building materials in, I don't know if there's much similarity around there, but between a body shop and a bungalow, but planners must have a wonderful time.
Didn't look like a bungalow, it looked like a two-storey building with aluminium cladding on the upper stories, if I understood the plan application.
Stan was trying to make the point there's different buildings down there, isn't there, Stan?
Yeah. There is different buildings there, but even going back to the previous one we just debated about at length, you'd expect some form of consistency with decisions, wouldn't you? And that's all I think we're trying to look at. So
do we want to make any comments on this one, or leave our comments as is? Okay, I'll move on to the next one then, which is CCC 21011 VAR, Sutton Primary School, the Brook Sutton, retention of the 7-bay mobile classroom for temporary period. I won't go through all the other words. So this is the one that was originally approved in July 2014. Jessica.
Sorry, question for Rosie there. I probably need to declare that I'm a school governor there. I don't know whether I do need to or not. Yeah, can I declare that and then I'll zip it now?
For you.
Sorry, I missed that bit, Rosie. Thanks.
Okay, anybody with any comments on this? You will notice if you've read the papers that there is mention that there is a feasibility study for a permanent solution, which I'm sure would be far preferable, but that's tied into the sort of developments, well, the Garden Close and in particular the second part of the Meeple Homes development, should that get approval. Happy to leave that one goes to the county council. We're happy to leave that for the county council. Yep. Okay. The next one, that's all. In the meantime, this one I noticed got approved on the 19th. The 21 00030 FUL, 35 St Andrews Close. So that we were past the consultation period, but it's actually been decided. So let's not spend any time on that one. The next one is 21 00304 FUL 8 the Brook Sutton, demolition of the existing conservatory and construction of a 2-storey and single-storey rear extensions along with internal additions and alterations. Anyone with any comments on that? Happy to leave that to the district council. And the last one is 21 00074 FUL 10 Ely Road, Sutton, erection of a double garage. That's, I think, an amendment to what's already there. Do we want to make any comments on that, or just leave that to the district as well? Okay, then we've got, there was one appeal that was dismissed. I won't read the whole reference numbers, that's quite long. Meadlands Farm and Cottage at the Gould. Tree works and consents, 21 00049 TPO, 3 Station Road, Sutton, and a whole series of tree works for which consent was given. That is the end of the planning section. So I'll jump back to finance. So we've got the payments to approve for March, and we've got one figure to fill in for the loan repayment.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just quickly swap the files over. I've just got a couple of other things just to tell you as well. On the online payments, the March salary and expenses payment, I've got a slight alteration to that. That should be an additional £50, which makes it £8,241.65. That is because we're reimbursing the Time Bank coordinator for some things that they've purchased with our COVID support grant, and that COVID support grant has got to be spent by the 31st of March. So I have just made that alteration to get that in before the end of the month. Okay. And the second one is the Viola. That is actually £115.56. We printed off 2 sets of invoices. I think it was because the February meeting was early and we didn't think it had captured it, but it did. And then the final one is the Public Works Loan Board, which is the loan repayment, and that's £8,096.25.
And that's the loan that was taken out all those years ago for the glebe.
Yes.
Okay. Anybody with any questions on any of those payments before we have a vote? No. Okay, I'll propose that we make those payments. Do I have a seconder for that? I'll go with, I think Brian was first. I see those in favour of making those payments. That's unanimous, isn't it?
Not quite, no, Jessica.
Okay, right, no. Okay.
Yes, that's okay. And then
Okay, those, any against? Any abstentions?
one abstention, thank you.
So the next one is, do you want to explain what the affiliation fee is?
Yes, this is the PALC. It's the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Association of Local Councils, and it's the annual affiliation. The council has chosen each year to affiliate to CAPALC, and it's the organisation that supports the council with its help, its legalities, and also for councillor training. I did send out quite a lot of information about what they do and some of the other services that they provide. The cost, I'm just flicking through my paperwork here. It's based on the affiliation fees, based on the number of electors. So for Sutton, it's £745.40, but there is an additional fee of £50, which is for the Data Protection Officer membership scheme, which I would recommend to the council that they do consider opting into. That would be in the event that we had an investigation with a data protection breach, and we would be able to utilise the services of the CAPALC officer to help us go through that process if required. So the total for the year is £795.40.
Okay, any questions or comments on that? Bob?
Just a quick one, Joan. We've got £1,600 in the budget going forwards for affiliation fees and things like that. And I presume, right, question for the clerk really, SLCC is a well-known and appreciated organisation and supports the clerks and presumably other members of the staff as well. Is there a place for just one of these rather than two?
I would say not, would be what I would say. The CAPALC supports the council and the council's decisions and councillors. The SLCC supports the clerk and the assistant clerk in our case. Both organisations provide a huge amount of support, advice, information that we require, but I would advise it's necessary to have both, especially when you're talking about disputes or employment legislation and that sort of thing.
Mm. Yeah, so there have been instances where other parish councils have had some sort of employment dispute with the clerk, and obviously then the councils relies on CAPALC to take it to advise it on how to respond.
We've not had a dispute in my time on the council, which goes back about 7 or 8 years now. So I was just looking to see whether there was a cost-saving opportunity. I think training is something we've all valued at various times, but you either you can still have the training, it's just that you pay a little bit more for having it if you're not affiliated. I can see you're dying to say something, Rosie.
I fully understand why you're saying that there was a cost-saving exercise, but you're looking at not a huge cost saving based upon what you would require from the service if you needed it going forward.
It's a bit like insurance policy.
It's the office that we do use on a weekly basis for advice for the council.
Okay.
And we also do get access to all of the NELC resources through CAPALC as well.
Yes, and we do get direct access.
Yeah.
That's allowed because I'm qualified.
So I'm going to propose that we do approve the affiliation. Do I have a seconder? Is Steve seconding? Yep. Anybody with any other comments on that? If not, can I see those in favour?
that's unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, and then that takes us to, making sure I've not missed anything out, takes us to 18121 Sutton Parish draft lease for the recreation ground. So that was circulated. So previously, this has gone, I think, back and forth a couple of times.
Chair, you need to kick me out.
Yeah, well, yeah, we should do that, yes.
Thank you.
I'll just put you in the waiting room for this, yeah. Yeah, so we've had this gone back and forth a couple of times with the Porcelain Charity, of which Rhett is a representative, which is why he's not taking part in this part of the meeting. And they came back recently with the latest update, didn't they? And they're only suggesting one change. Could you just remind us what is the last change, Rosie?
Sorry, I just pulled it up in front of me. I might have to read the whole sentence to make sense of it. I've amended the lease to take account of your agreed amendments, and a copy of the revised document is attached. The wording highlighted in green is what the trustees need our solicitor to revise on. The wording highlighted in bold, black, shows the amendments as per your email. So that's the Parish Council's amendments. With the exception of clause 10, I have redrafted the clause, which I hope the council will find acceptable. So it's clause 10 that is different to what we sent in, and that is
I've got that in front of me that says,
right, okay.
Yeah, the use for the recreation ground will be for leisure only for the whole of the term of the lease. Should the district council require a new planning application, it is Sutton's responsibility to apply. I don't believe there is any need for any sort of planning application, but I think the Porcelain is just concerned that they could be required to do something if they didn't have that in the lease. Are we happy with that? We've approved the other changes before. Are we happy with that clause 10? No one is objecting, so I'm going to propose that we approve those amendments. I have a second.
Say it, Brian. What are you about to do, Brian?
I was just saying, while our chairman was looking down, I've been involved on the subcommittee working party looking at this. I think we agreed that it wasn't ever going to be an issue, and therefore it is probably it is very acceptable as it stands on their preferred wording.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you were going to second as well, Lynn, given you're in such agreement, Brian. Good, excellent. Can I see any other comments on that? Are we happy to just? If not, okay. Can I see those in favour of those amendments to the lease?
That's unanimous, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, that's good, because I think we've had several years without a.
Could you let?
I'll let Brett back in. Yeah, we've had several years without the proper cover of the lease, so we now have. We'll hopefully shortly have that back in place. We've then got 18221 Cambridgeshire County Council grass verge maintenance. To receive verbal details from the parish clerk on the agreement and the county council's new protocol, and then the council to discuss details of the protocol and to consider how to undertake a way forward with the grass verge maintenance.
Shall I enlighten the council? As a lot of you will be aware, there's been the Open Spaces working parties have been planting bulbs and wildflowers along some of the verges in the village. We, back in November as a council, approved the specification that the Open Spaces group gave to us for the differing cuts to the areas where they wanted to plant. So with that, we went out to tender, and we agreed in November that we would use a particular contractor, and the contract has been issued. So a couple of weeks ago, I noticed on Councillor Dupre's blog that she had some information regarding the new protocol from the County Council regarding what resident volunteers could do and not do with relation to planting into grass verges. And it appeared that this didn't take into account that not just Sutton, but a number of parish councils in Cambridgeshire actually run the contracts to cut the grass verges. And of course, historically, they were just that, they were grass verges. So on seeing that, I sent an email to Councillor Dupre to see if she could gather some information for us regarding the new protocol from the County Council, of which Lorna kindly did. And we've literally received a response at 10 to 5 this afternoon from the highway maintenance manager from the County Council. And what he says actually doesn't, in my mind, totally answer the questions that I was asking. So I think we'll need to have a bit more discussion on this. But he says that the paper that was approved deals with rural areas that the County Council manage directly between the urban areas, and the urban areas that are either County Council directly or County Council make a contribution to the parish to cut. The contribution made is what it would cost the County Council to carry out the work directly. There is no proposed increase or decrease to the amount paid to the parishes, although we are currently reviewing this in the new financial year. Now, I question that part because I am aware that to do differing cuts around wildflowers and bulbs uses different machinery and would actually cost more than just a blanket cut over the verges. He goes on to say, I would suggest if the parish are keen to have wildflower areas, then in the first instance have a conversation regarding the proposed location with their team, and they will be involved in this, as we've already mentioned. There are some areas that we would be concerned about, and that's on things like some roundabouts and some of the sight lines. When you're coming out of junctions, you need to be able to allow for the visibility. So there's still quite a big piece of work. As I said, this literally came in this afternoon. So I think what I'll need to do is to digest it. And also they didn't send a copy of the new protocol, so I haven't seen that as yet. So I will put this back onto the agenda for April with hopefully a little bit more information. But one of my concerns for the council, sort of on a legal point of view, is we passed this resolution in November last year to go into the 3-year contract. And if you refer to Standing Order number 7 on previous resolutions, there is a procedure to revisit that resolution, and if councillors were minded to put through the special motion to rescind that, then we couldn't actually revisit that same topic for a further 6 months, and therefore that would have implications on our grass cutting maintenance for the year and its contract. So it is quite an issue that we need to sort of understand where we need to go with it. So hopefully we'll have some more concrete information for next meeting.
Okay, anyone with any comments on this? Brian?
Yeah, can I suggest that the Open Spaces Working Group lead be approached as and when you've got the information, Rosie? I think if you, that will be just speaking to one person from that working party. Because already we've had a meeting since the last full council meeting, and one member there was saying, well, I don't know if it's quite right, this contract. And I think if you speak to the lead person, that's the person is going to give you a focused view.
Well, the contract that we went with was the specification that came from the working party, and the council agreed the working party specification. So
I'm on your side. I agree. Yes.
Okay, anything else to say on that item? No, we'll wait and hopefully get more information for the next meeting then.
Mark, Andrew.
Mark, I just want to
Andrew,
just remind me, when are the first cuts due on the grass? It's later in the year, isn't it? So we've got time to discuss this.
No, but the specification starts in April. The contract starts in April. So we will be making some cuts to some areas in April.
Right.
Other cuts will be after the bulbs have finished in sort of June. And then I think it's again in October. I haven't got all the details in front of me, but
Right.
some areas actually start in April and some of the planted areas are a little bit later on.
Okay. So are you going to have time for us to make that decision, and is it going to impact on that actual works then?
At this point in time, I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping I can get the information from the county council for the April meeting, but it could be a bit problematic. I mean, please don't get me wrong. I'm not suggesting that the council might be against any additional planting. We've just got to follow the right procedure.
Bob.
Just a quick one, really, because I'm fully supportive of all the work that's been going on in the village in terms of planting and the work on Stankers Pond. But I go down Station Road quite a lot, and there are some young sapling trees being planted in the verge, and I think that's a different area to go into other than wildflowers. When it comes to cutting, you can see some damage being created, and I'm assuming that the trees, the saplings, have been approved from the county council highways, but it may be that there's sort of crossing necessary to do that. So, well, watch this space.
Anybody else with any comments on this item? No. Okay, so 18321 committees and working parties. So the first one is the Village Hall Management Committee. So this is the meeting we have twice a year. So you've got the minutes. For the last 2 or 3 meetings, we've only had representatives from the Royal British Legion Club and not from the branch. It's not entirely clear, I think, to us how whether the branch is still operating. There are no recommendations or any actions we need to take from or decisions we need to take as a council coming from those minutes. The club itself is hoping they can reopen soon, but I think they were still, when we met, they weren't quite sure whether it would be viable for them to open in April for just outdoor use, or whether it might be more sensible for them to wait until more restrictions have been lifted in June. Anyone with any questions on those minutes? No. So we're just receiving those, so we don't need a vote on that. We've then got the Finance and Controls Working Party, the meeting that was held on the 2nd of February, is that correct? And that, so that shouldn't that be the 15th of March?
Mm.
Yes. So because the minutes we've got, so our most recent meeting, which is the 15th of March, we've got two decisions that are arising from that. Does anybody, before we go on to the decisions we need to make, does anyone have any questions or queries on the minutes of the meeting? So if not, then the first decision we need to make is to adopt the reserves policy. Rosie, do you want to just quickly explain to councillors what that purpose of that policy is? You're muted.
That's it. Yeah, the purpose of the policy, it's, as a parish council, we actually have to hold a certain amount of reserves in the main general reserves. That's in order that we can move from one financial year to the next without a risk that we might not have the money to do so. For example, if the precept was late coming in, or we had some unexpected expenditure that we might have to use, that would sort of help us to carry that out. The other reserves are earmarked reserves, and they're made up of monies that we put in our budget for specific items. That also can include the community infrastructure levy monies that we put in towards some of our projects that we want to do. So this policy is just to make sure that the council understands what its reserves are for, why it's holding them, and how we manage them going forward. And they will be reviewed through our finance working party in the main, and then anything will be brought to full council as necessary, especially if there was a new use of a reserve. That would be a recommendation from the working party.
Okay. Anyone with any questions on the reserve policy? So Bob.
Just a quick, I lost the thing. There we go. Sorry, I had it available a minute ago. It was on the use of the definition of what we meant by general reserve. First of all, compliment Rosie on pulling this together very quickly, but there's a lot of backslashes and forward slashes, and I tried to understand the difference between precept and levy and or, and I just, in terms of tidying up, it might be better to have the backslash, which I think it should be, or the forward slash should be consistent, I think. And the other one is the 3 to 12 months guidance that JPAG recommends. Should that be of the net revenue expenditure? It's a simple word insert if it is. No, I've got it back now. Yeah. So it's on the bottom of page 1. But otherwise, I've got no issues with it at all. It does the business.
So the first thing you want to change is in the second paragraph into 2.3. You want
2.3, yeah.
All forward slashes. And
I believe that it would be correct. I think I can see how it's arisen because it's incorrect actually in JPEG.
Yeah.
But and then in the middle of that paragraph still is the net revenue expenditure definition. And I think we're trying to maintain our general reserve at between 3 and 12 months of net revenue expenditure.
Yeah.
Small points, I fear, but when you've got policies, they have to be right.
Okay, so you want the word of
in front of net.
Month and net, yeah. Anyone else with, well, I guess we'll take that as a proposal from Bob. Happy to second that just so we can get that formally proposed. Anybody with any other comments? So if we go with Bob's proposal, which is to approve with those amendments, can I see those in favour of that proposal?
It's unanimous, thank you.
And then the next one is the internal auditor's report, which was done remotely this time. Maybe, Rosie, if you can just quickly explain what was different this time and how you managed to have a virtual internal audit.
Yes, Chairman, because of the inability to be in the office and meet face to face, the internal auditor arranged a virtual audit which meant I'm obviously sitting remotely in my home and she's wherever she was. What happened was the auditor spent a couple of hours viewing our website, and that's where information was taken from. Normally, if I'm in the office, then files are given to her. She has all the working party folders, which has obviously got quite a lot of background information in as to how we've got to the decisions that full council are making. And there was also some time lapse between us making decisions. For example, the financial risk assessment hadn't hit the website because we hadn't yet approved it and processed it. So it did lead to some difficulties which neither the internal auditor or myself were used to. And I think that is sort of reflected in the report that she'd submitted to the chairman. That's it really. It was just a very different audit. She will be doing the second part of the audit after the year end, which will be incorporate signing off the internal auditors section of the AGAR, the annual return year end forms, and all being well, we might be able to sort of meet in the office, and then we'll be able to go over some of the things that we perhaps need to clarify a bit more from this time round.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody with any questions or comments on the internal auditors report? I think with regard to her comment about thanking parish council staff, I think we've done that before, but I'm happy to thank them again for all of the hard work that they've put in over the past year. I'm sure other parish councillors will agree.
Thank you. I'll pass that back onto the team.
Right. Okay. So I'll propose that we accept the internal auditors report. Do I have a seconder? Bob Parker was first. So I see those in favour of accepting the internal auditors report.
That's unanimous. Thank you.
Okay. Next, we've got Traffic and Transport Working Party on the 18th of February. So I'll ask Bob Harker to speak to that.
Thank you, where's it gone? There's a couple of recommendations we're making, and because of the timescales, back in the 18th of February we had the meeting. The action that sort of rather is tied up with the first recommendation won't have happened yet. But if I could explain, we do have the mobile vehicle activated sign, which has been deployed at now I think 3 different sites around the village, is giving us amazingly detailed data about speed of movement, maximum speeds in both directions. So just because you're not going in direction towards the camera doesn't mean to say it's not picking you up. It is picking you up on the reverse side. So I get a bar chart of all the vehicles that pass it, no number plates or anything like that, of course, and a breakdown of the proportionality of the speed in various 5-mile lumps. It's a complicated download, as Rosie will attest to, I'm sure, in terms of the computer that backs up the MVAS, but all in all, the amount of data we're getting is very meaningful and has been shared quickly with the Traffic and Transport Working Party. What has been suggested, and I'll give Rosie credit for this as well, and Mark, is that we are sometimes wanting to find data which we believe would be helpful to support the parish council's views on which are further areas of the village which would help. We could put in place some traffic mediation plans, but we don't have the data. Now, at the moment, our MVAS can only go on certain lampposts around the village that had to be approved by the County Council and Balfour Beatty for safety reasons and access and all sorts of things. So we've primarily looked at the arterial routes around the village, being the Ely Road, the Brook, the America, and the High Street. So those are the only areas in which the MVAS that is bought through an LHI scheme with the county council will be operating. The proposal we're making, a recommendation, is subject to some clarity, but the recommendation is that we buy a second MVAS so that we could investigate traffic speeds and frequency along the row, possibly Berry Lane, possibly Pound Lane, other areas of the village where there have been concerns expressed about traffic. We would have the freedom, without having to sit with our primary role of trying to control traffic speeds on the arterial routes, we could then use a different piece of equipment to investigate other areas. As such, we would still probably need to obviously cite it in the same way, we'd get the same amount of data, and we are just wanting to make sure, and hence the action that underpins this recommendation, that any such data would be accepted by the county council when we come to evaluate any change, for instance, to speed limits. There has been a proposal to 20 miles an hour, for instance, would be desired by residents along the road for traffic moving along the road. And there are various guidelines that the county council use. I think it's 85 percentile speed has to be 24.5 miles an hour or something like that in order to push for a 20-mile-an-hour limit. It already has to be relatively slow-moving traffic. So the recommendation is, subject to that clarification from the county, that they would accept such data from a parish council-owned MVAS. And if so, we would ask that the clerk be given the authority by this council to purchase another MVAS, which we would then have as parish council asset, as is the existing one, but it would be owned by the parish council and deployed at our behest. The cost of such a unit is about 3,600 at the last count. So we've put in a condition on this recommendation that provided the cost entity, the clerk be empowered to go ahead and purchase such a unit. And the costs would be met from SIL, not the general reserve. That is the first recommendation, Chair. I hope I've explained that in sufficient detail. Do you want to take a vote on that one first before we go on to a second one?
Yeah, I was going to first of all see if anyone's got any questions or clarification on that or comments. Stan.
Just one fundamental question. How long do these things last, and what's the ongoing costs, and do we expect to get 5 years out of it, 3 years? Does it need software upgrades, etc., etc., etc.? You know, £3.5 a few quid, and if we only get a couple of years, do we spend more to get a better one, which would give us a longer period of time?
Good question, Stan. I can't answer you.
Okay.
I'll turn to Rosie, but my expectation would be to get at least 5 years from one of these, as they've been around other villages for a lot longer than we've had ours, and they are on rechargeable batteries. It is pretty up-to-date software at the moment. I know they all go out of fashion fairly quickly. There is a maintenance program we agreed for the smiley face, but I'm not sure I remember one for the MVAS. Rosie, can you help me out here?
No, I mean, I would think as a new piece of equipment, we're probably going to be under some sort of warranty to start with. But I mean, when I make my inquiries about, you know, the data, etc., then I can certainly ask those questions as well.
Yeah, I think they're very good, and the one was just down the American hours, and certainly when the high street is very effective. But like some of you guys who are on that working party, I did have one resident who complained that it was faulty and didn't realise when it was reading 20, the speed limit was 50.
It's amazing how few people know there's a 20-mile-an-hour limit along the high street.
Education.
Despite all the signs and bumps and things.
Quite amusing.
It is. I have stood and watched car brakes go on to try and, especially I have to say, commercial drivers, very respectful of the speeds. I think it's the, dare I say, people who are more used to travelling along the route say, well, I always drive at this speed and it's never bothered anybody in the past and things like that.
It's probably been before, but I think in comparison to the smiley face, this one in particular is so more effective. I don't know if your data reflects that, but
Yes, it does.
not from a physical point of view of being in the village all day, driving cars all day. It is certainly effective. It seems to be.
I've been very pleased with the data. I've been very pleased with the reaction of villagers, and I've been very, very pleased at the response of, should we say, the more caring drivers. They always get one or two. I think the record speed I've seen along the high street is allegedly 70 miles an hour, which almost beggars belief. But there you go. That's what it says. And the rest of the data looks valid, looks entirely appropriate. So one has to believe everything one sees.
Right, Brian's patiently had his hand up there.
Oh yes,
well supported. Rosie's raised the point that there's normally a guarantee with new equipment. It's normally a year or a couple of years, and it's likely, unless the display proves problematic, that the only thing that is likely to go is the battery, and battery technology is just getting better and better and better. So if our battery failed in, say, 3 years or 4 years, it's highly likely that we could replace it with whatever the then battery technology is, and all else being fine, extend its life for another 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, I could bore you with the something called the bathtub curve and why that electronic products follow, but a lot of other ones do as well. But if it doesn't fail in the first few weeks, it's probably going to last for quite a long period of time.
Yeah.
The general standards are sort of like 10 years. So I think the battery is you're probably right, Brian, it's the weakest link. But even then, we're only charging it every few weeks. So actually, we're not cycling it very often. And even the worst batteries, you can cycle several hundred times before they die.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else with any other comments? So I guess you're proposing that your recommendation then, Bob. I assume you're proposing it.
I am, Mr. Chairman.
Do I have a seconder for that? Brian? Can I see then those in favour of this purchasing a second MVAS subject to that clarification that Bob mentioned? Okay.
No, that's 10 for.
Okay, those against and those abstaining.
Thank you.
Then we've got a second recommendation, Bob.
Yeah, this is a very much more simple one, really. It relates down to the REC, and I don't know if people are familiar with the REC, but the REC is subject to the lease, of course, with Paul's Land. But to get access to the paddock, you either go through a gate or you go across a small footbridge. I've been very impressed with, as I think other councillors have, with the non-slip surface that's been put on the footbridge down at the Galt. And the effectiveness of that, the simplicity of it, lends itself also to being installed on the bridge, the footbridge that crosses between the REC and the paddock, which can get exceedingly slippery. I know people have been putting wood chips down there. I think Paul Young from Sutton Tree Services provided the chippings to try and overcome the mud issue, but the bridge itself is quite a slippery asset, a slippery facility, and I believe we own it, as opposed to being owned by the Paul's Land. And I've discussed it briefly with Brett, and from a health and safety point of view, it makes a lot of sense. And so it is recommended by this working party that the clerk to contact the county council who installed the non-slip surface on the long footbridge at Sutton Gold and try and obtain the same material up to, say, £1,000 to cover the footbridge between the old REC and the paddock. The linksman would be more than competent to install it, and I'd be amazed if there wasn't a lot of change out of £1,000. And again, it's an improvement, and the costs would be met by SIL rather than our general reserve. So that is the recommendation from this Traffic and Transport Working Party to improve the safety of villagers using that footbridge.
Any questions or comments? Brian?
Surprised it's that expensive. You're thinking it could be up to £1,000?
Not really. I'd be amazed if it wasn't less than half of that. But when you're buying one piece from the county council, I suspect that it'll be more than if you were buying 50 strips of it.
Okay, I suppose it depends whether they've got it in stock and are prepared to supply it on a pro rata basis.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, any other comments? Do you want to make that a formal proposal then, Bob, that we can then?
I'm happy to do that, Mr. Chairman.
And a seconder for that? I think Beth was first with that. Okay, can I see any other comments on that? If not, can I see those in favour of that proposal?
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Okay, good. So next we're on to the Climate Working Party. So Beth, do you want to just quickly summarise that one?
It was just a brief meeting to discuss the ECDC Climate Forum and briefly to talk about electric charging points, but that wasn't ours at the point, or that wasn't a climate thing at the time. So we'll be looking at that more next time we meet. Yeah, and we'll have to relook at the forum as well.
Yeah.
But that was basically the gist of it.
Okay, anybody with any questions? No, so we're just receiving that, so no, we don't need to vote on that. Sports and recreation. So first of all, we've got one recommendation, but before we get onto that, we've got the notes of the meeting, and this is right. Let me just quickly open those up. So as you'll see there, we were looking at walks around the village, where Andrew has done some sterling work identifying some walks. We've got a number of actions within the working party, but none of those that we need decisions from the council at the moment. We also looked at the Sports for All sort of spreadsheet from the consultation we did 18 months or more ago now, looking at what people wanted to see. I think, as we've said before, there we've got the usual problem of we're limited in terms of land that we own where we can put facilities, and then because it had come up recently, the issues with the mugger, we were looking at whether we could do something around. So this is where there had been problems with litter and broken bottles and so on. Looking at whether we could do something with trialing locked gates and along with regular cleaning of the area. So I asked the clerk just to explain what we already do in terms of cleaning and what the feasibility is of being able to replace the gates.
Thank you, Chairman. The gates on the mugger were removed some years ago now, actually, and they were the hinges weren't been damaged, so therefore the gates weren't shutting and they were just hanging off really. So we had them removed and we did get the hinges mended, and in order to get them back onto the posts, it's more than our caretakers and our landsmen can handle alone. They're quite heavy gates, and obviously they've got to be lifted at some height. So we might have to have a look at how we can do that. We have, for some of our play area repairs, we have used a company that are based fairly locally called Fendon Leisure, and it might be we can contact them to see if they would give us either some advice or a quotation to actually come and put them back on securely. once that's happened, we can certainly have a discussion about locking them and keeping the area locked unless it is actually booked to be used, or whichever procedure the council wants to use. The cleaning, our caretakers are tasked to walk the whole football pitch area and around the mug and the pavilion on a regular basis to clear up litter and glass, etc. Over the last few months, we have suffered from a huge amount of vandalism. Just this weekend, we've had the meter cover box has been kicked, so we've got to get that replaced. And we do appreciate that we have noticed that residents have been out and kindly collected up litter and glass when we haven't been on site to do so. But it is quite a problem with some of the vandalism at the moment. But we can certainly get some advice on how we put the gates back up to go forward from there.
So that really sounds like the next step is to get that advice on how we could put the gates back, and then we can discuss the procedure for locking them. We're happy to agree to, do we need a formal proposal? Oh, Stan, yes.
Just one quick comment. As the person who took the gates off because they was damaged or knackered, to put it bluntly, I think those hinges need to be reinforced quite significantly if we are thinking about locking them. If there was damage the first time, obviously what they was constructed of wasn't suitable. So whoever we ask to do it, it needs to uplift the integrity of those hinges. See if we can get the Forth Road Bridge design team down.
So do you need a resolution for us to investigate the
No, I don't think so. I think I can just investigate that, and then if the costs look prohibitive and needs to come back to the council for approval, then I will do that. I'll bring it back.
Okay. Then we're on to public space working party. So Brian, can you just introduce this for us? You're on mute.
Yes. Broadly speaking, I mean the items that are on the list here are pretty much what we're looking for. Just to say, within the group, there are still there are three groups really, and there is not always a coherence of policy. Quite a lot of wild planting and wild activity is done by the conservation group or members of the conservation group who are represented on this working party. And it is sometimes a little bit frustrating when something gets done that's been talked about in a general sense, but not actually agreed as a policy going forward. Something that was mentioned earlier on is this saplings thing, where yes, it's very nice to have trees, and if a group of people decide they're going to put saplings in, but without permission, it's a bit rich when a bit later on they come back to us and say, but make sure you're careful to mow around the saplings, which hadn't been agreed to be put in there in the first place. So leaving that aside for a moment, the redevelopment work, shall we say, that's gone on down at Stankers Pond seems to have attracted a lot of popular support and feeling, and people are going down there and finding that it is quite beautified, it's accessible. Because of the nature of the site, every winter when it rains like crazy, it fills up with silt and needs to be emptied. This year it was done with the help of a digger, and the follow-up to the digger work was to beautify the area. And that's led us to a conversation about picnic tables elsewhere. The appeal that's being put forward by the working party is for 3 picnic tables, 2 to be sited on the concrete base where the old pavilion stood on the old recreation ground, and one to be sited outside the fenced children's play area on Stirling Way. It may be felt it's a little early to be encouraging people to sit out at seats, but hopefully we are getting out of this ghastly business that we've been in for the last year. And that's why we're getting the request in early, because we know these things take time. It should be quite nice, we feel, for parents and guardians to sit outside the children's play area, and for just people generally of whatever age to be able to sit outside the play area, thus encouraging them to leave the play equipment for the generation for which it is primarily supplied. So that's the motivation for the one up by the fence play area. Done quite a lot of research into this, and as it says here, our preferred option for the tables is a recycled plastic wood, which is durable and vandal proof. I've got my own feelings about plastic, but it does seem to be extremely durable, and it would be giving a good extended life to furniture if it was sited down there. The offer is included in the notes. Do you want to deal with that one?
Yeah, I think we'll deal with them one at a time, and Jessica's already.
Okay, so that's it. That's the explanation, that hopefully we're coming out of this business, and it would be nice to have these social facilities in the village.
Okay, Jessica.
Brian, you yourself spoke about having lots of different groups that weren't necessarily communicating. This is something that we've been talking about in this sports and leisure group, about how to introduce more communal spaces, and is sort of worth a conversation between the two groups, perhaps, because I think there's two different lines there as well. So yeah. I think,
yeah, it might be helpful to have a representative of each on the other working party.
Getting a lot of working parties there, Brian.
Well, we're only talking about two in this case, aren't we?
I'll also say that £1,000 is still quite a lot of money as well.
Yes,
it's quite a significant sum when you can get a picnic blanket for £24.99 from Wilko. So,
well, the idea is to create a focus, or foci, as it were, there being three. And if you put something that is that bit more permanent, then it does encourage association with location. And that seems to have worked down at Stankers Pond. So that's the thinking that's brought us to this proposal.
Well, definitely worth talking to sports and leisure working party, because quite a lot of conversations already happened on that theme, I think. So there's, let's say, two of us running on similar train tracks parallel to each other.
Absolutely agree. Yeah.
I've got Bob Harker, and then I've got Beth.
Yeah.
Just Bob then.
I should defer to Beth, really, shouldn't I? Go on, Beth, you go first then.
No, I think.
Don't worry. I was just going to say the same thing, that we're looking at seating and stuff already in the other working party. And also I've looked at this website and I see nothing that says anything about it being vandal proof. And if we're already experiencing a lot of vandalism, I don't think adding something else right now is the greatest idea. But we're already looking at other stuff that's further down the line.
I do think we need to be communicating. The vandal proof thing is really based on members of the group having seen this particular equipment in other locations, and it hasn't been subject to vandalism. To say it's actually vandal proof is probably going one step further, but in locations that are reasonably equivalent to ours, there hasn't been vandalism to it. So it's resistant to it, let's say, but perhaps saying it's vandal proof is perhaps one step too far.
Bob.
So I'm agreeing with your point.
It's obviously a reversible vandal proof. I like the idea of putting something on that concrete pad, which is the only bit of the wreck which the parish council own. It's falling into disrepair. It would need smartening up, I think. Why not make a proper facility of it? There are a lot of people using the recreational field this last year. There's brambles around the edge, which could easily be tidied up as well, I'm sure. It cements the recreational use of that area, and I think the idea is commendable.
Brett, I think, is next, and then Stan.
Yeah, to raise a point for Brian is that when we looked at these type of benches in the past, one thing that was very strongly in their favour is that they are very low maintenance. We don't have to worry about future protection of timber benches. The plastic just is that, and it can be recycled should we become redundant. But they are zero maintenance once they're installed, and they would have to be bolted to the ground, I think, to make them, to help with the vandal-proof aspect, which doesn't, it's not a problem at the on the old pavilion site at the wreck, but it might be a problem near the play area, because you'd have to put concrete pads in the ground and then bolt them to that to stop people having them away. But yeah, low maintenance is a very key factor in the use of those plastic benches.
And Stan, I think, was next.
Yeah, just to reiterate the vandalism thing, I'm sure Rosie can remember when I was chair of the football club and it was sited there, and we had the best pavilion in the league. It's a flat pad now because it was vandalised consistently and frequently, and we made it Fort Knox. So it's unfortunately in the wrong location where you think you got vandalism at the current pavilion, where it was where the flat pad is now. It was notorious for being vandalised. So I just fear it will be a magnet because it is just that far out of sight. But that's just my historical grumble about teenagers.
Yeah, what's it like? Sorry, can I just make one small point there? The old wreck is not easily accessible by vehicles and motorbikes, unlike the pavilion.
It is
now. You've got cars turning up with gangs of people in it. The old pavilion, the old wreck is pretty well guarded by locked gates, except one minor access on the far eastern corner. But anyway, that's a minor point.
Can I make a suggestion, Chairman? In that clearly there's the sports and leisure people are already working on parallel lines to this. Can I suggest that that our working party withdraws this proposal for now, talks to the other representatives of the other working party, and then brings it back to council? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Okay, so withdrawing that one.
Right.
Next one.
Sports and recreation, so you can talk to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you can talk
protocols, Andrew.
Yeah.
Request for a litter bin to be sited on Berry Lane. Suggestion is that it's sited near the seat. If people are going to be sitting on seats and dropping bottles and dropping cans, it's just common sense to have a litter bin right next to it. So,
Chairman, could I just update the council, because it is some time ago now. We did have an agenda item and it was agreed that we would ask the district council to provide us with 3 litter bins actually. One for Berry Lane, one for Sutton Court near the Anchor, and High Street near Fieldgate. And we have been informed by the district council there has been a delay, not too sure why, but they are back on it now and they are going to provide those bins. They do pay for them, they do install them, and obviously they do collect from them. So we have to be guided by them as to where they are located, because the actual bin lorry, etc., has to be able to get access to them. And also with that order, we have actually purchased a dog bin that is potentially going to go down at the road near the footpath of Lawn Lane and the wreck. And again, with the dog bins, although the parish council purchases them, they do have to get approval from the district council, and they do dictate as to their location, which might be something to bear in mind when we get onto the dog bin conversation.
okay, thanks for that. That's an update. I'll feed that back.
Thank you.
Yeah, Item 3 is dog bins. Can we move them away from seating? Have they ever arrived next to seating? I cannot imagine. But one or two of our members pointed out the fact that if you're going to sit down, the last thing you want to be sitting next to is a dog bin. And I appreciate that this may actually be quite challenging, but can we at least look at moving dog bins away from seating wherever possible? It does seem counterintuitive that that's where they're located now, where any of them are located now. It's also got the point there, if there's a need for 2 dog bins along the row, one on the corner near the end of footpath 2 and one near the end of Painters Lane.
So we've got the bin we've just purchased that Rosie just told us about, I think is already the one that will go at the end of footpath 2.
Mm-hmm.
That's already.
There's already a bin at the end of Painters Lane.
That was my next point, yeah.
Yeah, I use it regularly.
Somebody's missed it. I'll take that back.
It is by a bench.
I'm not a dog walker, so
but
I
it's not a
cannot
dog bin,
notice
it's a
it.
general bin.
But you can still use it, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing. You can put dog mess within a bag into an ordinary litter bin. That is permissible.
Therefore, I don't see the argument of moving dog bins away, but if you want other bins next to benches where the same things are going to go in them, that sounds counterintuitive too.
Well, the idea of having a bin that's labelled for dog mess is to encourage people to use those bins. Although it may be permissible to drop a poo bag in another bin, it's surely better to encourage it to go into a bin away from a seat. That seems logical to me.
Let's not get sidetracked into.
I think it's most likely to end up in the first bin they come across.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as long as it ends up in a bin and not hanging off the nearest tree or left on the ground.
Yeah. Makes a terrible Christmas decoration. Okay, fine. I will feed that back. But if there are any dog bins that are right next to seating, it does seem sensible to me to move those away. Do we have an objection to that?
Which is that I guess it's the only one by the surgery, is the only one I can think of. Bob.
Although correct in thinking that the district council have a say in where the dog bins go, it's not left to the parish council to decide. We can request one in the vicinity of, but they then choose a location.
That's correct.
And Rosie, I thought I heard you say that one was being installed at near the wreck at the bottom of Lawn Lane. Well, there is one down there.
No.
Has been for years.
No, it's been installed in the row.
Okay, I misunderstood.
Yeah, at the end of the row, isn't it? At just where the footpath starts.
Fine.
Yeah, beginning of the footpath, of the Lawn Lane in the wreck.
Yeah.
Okay, item 4 is notification of a request to organise a big litter clear up. Now, we've already had this mentioned in an earlier item of the big litter pick. And there is apparently a great British spring clean in late May, early June. And the suggestion is to synchronise with that.
That's the one that we're linking to for the 20th of June.
Yep, I'll take that back. And, oh, here we go. Another cutting scheme. Request for this area. Coincide with the Great British Spring Clean.
Chairman, while Brian's just thinking, can you check where Stan is?
Maybe sometime. Carry on.
Stan.
Yeah, we seem to have lost Stan, don't we? Yeah.
Okay, I've thought I can come back to the meeting if you like. Request for this area to be included in revised grass cutting scheme. Brook roundabout to be cut only twice. I suspect this is something that's got to be referred to traffic or district or something of the sort. Is it traffic? Sorry, traffic.
Back to the discussion we had on the previous item that we need to understand. We need more information from the county council, I think, in the first instance on what we can and can't do with the new new scheme, and then we need to think about whether we need to then go through a process to change the contract. We need to decide whether we want to go through a process to change the contract that we agreed last autumn.
Fine. Yeah, happy with that. I think I finished.
Okay, all done. Any questions? Any questions?
Do all those recommendations without having one.
Yes, good, wasn't it?
But on a more positive note, a lot of those things are already happening, if not quite as quickly as we'd like, or on their way.
And I think the engagement with the other working party stroke subcommittee is going to be constructive too.
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Okay. And then the next item is for me to give a verbal update on the neighbourhood plan working party. Sorry, I've had a busy day. I'm having to look at the notes from yesterday's meeting to try and remember what happened. So we had a proposed timeline from Ian Poole, who's the planning consultant we use, which depending on what the district council come back to us with in terms of housing numbers, shows us finishing just before Christmas or maybe February. So the good news is it's within about a year from now we should have been able to submit a revised plan for a review, so it wouldn't take anything like as long as it took to create the original plan. We had the question of the boundaries for the revised neighbourhood plan, because the parish boundaries had changed in 2018, and that meant in particular that the biggest change was the field opposite Brick Lane in Meeple, and some of the properties on the road between Meeple and Witcham moved from Sutton to Meeple. So those would move into, so those are now in Meeple Parish, but are still covered by the neighbourhood plan. So at the previous meeting, one of the Meeple Parish Council vice chair came along and then took that back. We asked the question, does Meeple want us to stay with the existing boundaries or move to the new Sutton boundaries? They discussed that at their last meeting, and they're keen that when we review the plan, we move to the new Sutton boundaries, which I think is easiest for us as well. So we will come back when we've got some minutes to put on the agenda with a recommendation that we go with the revised plan on the new boundaries. There was a long list of recommendations on how we could how we should update the plan. Most of those were down to so our planning consultant to come back with more detailed words. But there were a few key ones that I'll just mention, and these will be in the minutes for next time. So one was we wanted to consider revisiting the key issues in that we identified in Chapter 4 of the Neighbourhood Plan, because there've been some changes, obviously, since we identified what those key issues were 4 or 5 years ago. So, for example, from a shopping perspective, we now have the co-op. The other thing that probably makes it, we probably haven't worked through the impact yet, but is the impact of COVID. And for example, that could change things like with more people working from home and so on. That might mean we want to make some changes there in terms of policies. Question of looking at whether we need to, whether there are any other green spaces we want to protect that we didn't allocate in the earlier plan. We're going to make use of the fact that we have a caretaker who's also an ecologist to help us with reviewing the biodiversity plan, because that's quite a big area where the district council has has put together a supplementary planning document and something where we think there's more potential to generally to boost the neighbourhood plan. We thought that it would be good, although it to update the traffic and transport chapter and ask the traffic and transport working party to look at that. There probably isn't much in terms of planning policy there, but there may be more community actions we want to do, and maybe use that, develop that chapter a bit more with the sort of the ideas that the working party's got, to give a bit more of a long-term vision as to where we want to head. And similarly with the sports, recreation and leisure, that we asked the Sports and Recreation Working Party to look at that. We tried to see whether we could do much on climate change, but unfortunately we're constrained by what's in the local plan, and we can't do more than is in the local plan. So we can't put in a neighbourhood plan anything to, for example, to around adding more from a planning perspective, putting more charging points in, or to make houses more insulate houses better and things like that. So we did ask about that, but unfortunately there's not a lot we can do there. That really needs the district to update the local plan. And then through locality, there's a company called ACOM who are working on a housing needs survey for us and a design code. So housing needs survey, they'll come back and give us some good data on what the need is for affordable housing. Then we can see whether we have a neighbourhood plan that's matching those requirements. The design code is something that we didn't have last time, but some other neighbourhood plans have included, and I think we had a look at a draft of one or two others, and so we will Aon preparing a draft of that as well. And what we'll probably need to do is to within the plan that we've got, we're looking at trying to tie in consultation we need to do with the sort of the period over the summer when hopefully the lockdown restrictions have gone, and also when we've got our sort of summer newsletter going out, so we can put information in there, and if we organise some sort of event as well, then we can use the newsletter to make people aware of that. So short term, next time we need to decide on the boundaries, we'll get the housing needs survey, housing numbers from East Cambs, and the draft design code, and we need to feed in, I think if those two working parties can feed in their ideas around sports and recreation and around traffic and transport, then those can all feed into a draft updated document that we can then consult with the village, go through that proposal, and once we finish that consultation and updated the document, then we can we then go through the process again with ECDC and ultimately have another village sort of referendum to adopt the new plan. And obviously until that happens, the existing plan stays in place. Any questions on all of that? No, okay. So 18421 diary dates. We've got the EPR joint meeting at 1 o'clock on the 15th of April. And I can't remember. I know I asked last time and we couldn't remember who we had appointed to that.
That's Bob Harker and I want to say Brett. Is that right? Can't see. Yep.
Okay. And I'll be there wearing my district council hat, or actually I'll be here because it'll be over Zoom. And then we've got the annual meeting of the electorate with the new date that was mentioned earlier in the meeting of the 29th of April. And then we've got dates of next meeting. Is the personnel committee still with?
No, I might be looking to change the date of the personnel committee meeting, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our next full council meeting is the 27th of April, and then, as we heard earlier, the annual meeting of the parish is the 4th of May. And with that, I'll close the meeting.